Welcome to the Sideline Live podcast. Subscribe for more episodes and follow our social media at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. Today I'm delighted to welcome the host of the Primal Podcast, Danny Campion. Danny also runs Primal Productions and has been a huge help to me over the last couple of months. He's a really interesting story and has given some really good insight to those looking to start their own podcast. I hope you enjoy the episode. Hi Danny, thanks a million for coming on the podcast.
Well, thanks very much for having me on.
Yeah, of course.
It's great to be here.
What I like to do is I kind of like to give the guests about 20-30 seconds, or if you want to take a bit longer, I know you'd like to
speak. We're going to need about half an hour to get me in.
Kind of give a little bit of background on yourself in terms of your professional sporting or whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, 100%. It's not a particularly interesting story, so I'll condense it down really quickly. Essentially, I trained as an athletic therapist, as a sports physio. That's what I practiced when I came out of college. I worked in a functional medicine clinic with Dr. Sam Van Eden in Malahide. So for 10 years, I was doing a lot of, we won't call it alternative medicine, it was functional stem cell based. I did some of my own rehabilitation work, very quickly got out of the physio world and into the functional medicine world. Started to learn a lot more about nutrition and health and general wellness and performance, and at the same time was trying to apply that to my own personal life, because I play football as well with Fingallians, as you know. Yeah. Best club in the country.
That's
so I'm proud of that. So my kind of career path stayed in the health and wellness industry with the athletic therapy background, but moved a lot more into general wellness. And that sounds kind of airy-fairy, but it was to do with how do you help people achieve the goals in their health or professional or personal life that they want to. So I worked in that clinic for 10 years there. And why I'm doing what I do now, which is essentially running a podcast studio and helping people run podcasts and things like that, is along that journey, what was really powerful for me was meeting people and talking to people who were completely different from me, from all walks of life, male and female, of all ages, who had serious value to offer my life and the people around us. And then I started to work with people, the Dr. Sam I was working with, and other people we'd meet professionally and personally, who had just incredible methods of offering value to me and to our clients, and it really stuck with me. And at the same time, a friend of mine had actually recommended, this is about, I'd say 5-6 years ago now, recommended the Joe Rogan Podcast. Let's get out there straight away, because we're going to talk about Joe quite a lot in this podcast. But I started listening to podcasts as well, and that was another add-on in my life for finding information and tips and techniques and ways of improving my life, but also improving the lives of the patients that we were dealing with and seeing with, because we'd apply a lot of the stuff that I'd learned, not that I was learning from podcasting and treating patients with it, but you develop ideas and techniques from podcasts, and then you'd bring them into a clinical setting, you develop treatments around them, and you'd start to apply that and you'd see results. So that ended up with, in the last 3 or 4 years, myself and Dr. Sam starting our own podcast, the Human Regeneration Project, to try and educate people on the type of medicine we were doing, because it was different than your average medicine. There was a lot of functional stuff in there, regenerative stuff that people weren't familiar with. So the whole point behind the podcast was to try to educate people, but the same as we always talk about, it was to try and add value to people's lives. And that started to go really, really well. So I decided then I'd like to try my own podcast, because I was running the podcast for the clinic, but it was more of an educational tool for people specifically in our field. And a lot of the podcasts I would have listened to were just full of great tools for enhancing your life. Mental health, physical health, sporting performance, nutrition, whatever. So I decided I knew a lot of people who had really valuable information to share, and every time I spoke to them I got real buzzed and excited and running around telling everybody, waving the flag, and nobody cared. So I thought maybe if I do a podcast, more people will listen. So that got me into the world of starting podcasts. And then I decided to set up my company, Prymal Productions, to number one, help me get my own podcast going, because I just wanted to have interesting conversations with interesting people. It's the cliche, but that's why. That's where all the journeys start. And also to help other people who wanted to start their own podcasting journeys to get their information and get their story out there as well. So that's where this came from. The whole Dan the podcast guy thing. Yeah. It's not that I developed this for over a 20-year career or anything like that. It stemmed from my interest in health and wellness and offering value. And I think it's just a great medium for sharing that value with people. Was that 30 seconds?
Yeah, I think
about
we're
4 minutes. Anyway, that's a condensed version
Yeah.
of what I did and why we're here now.
Very good. So you've skipped a load of my questions, so it's great. You've already answered them. So then in terms of starting that podcast with Dr. Sam, where did you kind of, you do have a lot of audio knowledge now, but obviously you started with nothing because you did athletic therapy in DCU.
Yeah.
Where did that knowledge come from? Was there a course? Was there something online? How did you sort of educate yourself?
Yeah, I'm going to give you two little kind of caveats to this just to start off, because there's two things that always stick in my head. One was, I remember years ago, my parents run a Montessori school, and years ago I asked my mum, she was hiring somebody, and she was going through CVs and stuff, and I asked her, how does the hiring process work? And she's like, well, you submit your CV, and then she was like, but that's like 5% of it. I want people to sit in front of me and offer value to the business and offer value to the children, because they run a Montessori school, and she said the paper is almost not irrelevant. It helps a little bit, but it's not the be all and end all. And
it opens the door probably to have that conversation. And
exactly, yeah. So for me, the whole college thing, like, I was interested in sport and physical health and that kind of stuff. So I decided to do ATT, but I knew when I finished, it's not what I wanted to do the rest of my life. But it was very valuable as the open door to you can learn things. So that was my first kind of, I don't have to be what I studied.
Yeah.
And then the second thing was, I remember a few years ago, a friend of mine's bike broke down, and we were going, now I'm not a mechanic, I ride motorbikes, but I'm a mechanic, and we decided we were going to go and rebuild this engine. And I remember my girlfriend saying to me, you can't go rebuild an engine, it's really dangerous. And I was like, well, look, you can learn how to do anything, it's just because they didn't go to school to do this, and it's not taken away from people who did, because I'm not a mechanic, it was one specific job we were doing, but I can learn how to do this and do it well. And it's the same as going to school and learning how to do it and doing it well. In a way, it's the same. And she kind of said, okay, that's fair enough. But those two things always come to my head when people say, well, how did you learn how to do this? I taught myself essentially how to do this from resources, which is the same as everybody does, except when you go to school and college, you have teachers and lecturers helping you, which is great. But nowadays, we've so much access to resources online. Podcast is one of them, obviously. Yeah. But you have videos on YouTube, and you've access online to most resources. Like for rebuilding that engine, we had a full manual for how to rebuild the engine, plus about 50 videos of people who would rebuild the engine successfully. Now, I'm not saying everyone should go out there and try and rebuild their engine, but the theory was, with the podcast stuff, I can learn how to do a lot of this stuff online. I'd already kind of spent 2 years teaching myself video and photography techniques, and my dad is big into photography as well, so it's like, you can learn how to do this stuff, and if I need help, I'll get help. So that's to answer your question in a long roundabout way. I decided I didn't need to have a barrier to me would have been if I said I have to go to audio engineer school to learn how to do this. That would have been a barrier, and I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done anything. I would have done the podcast. So I decided I'm not going to go to school to do this, but I'm going to learn online. I'm going to try and find out how to do this the best I possibly can, and if I get stuck, I'll ask for help. And I did. So YouTube, what do you call it? The Academy of YouTube or whatever.
The YouTube degree is
the YouTube degree. I had a YouTube degree, so I taught myself how to do most of it from YouTube. Did a lot of reading on blogs online. I went and I visited 4 or 5 different studios, and I asked the engineers in the studio, what was I doing? Basically, I went in and said, this is what I'm doing. Am I messing any of this up? And they were able to point, well, don't do this, do that, don't do this. So combining all of that together, I decided I had enough knowledge then to run a podcast. So then I started with Dr. Sam. And literally, I mean, most people who run podcasts know this, and they laugh when they hear it. I was in one of the rooms with a sheet over my head and a handheld mic, and I was trying, why doesn't this sound good? And I was trying different techniques, and it was brutal at the start. And every one I did, I learned something from it, and then you get better and better and better. And like that, people say you need experience to do this. That was my experience. So it was the YouTube Academy, and then it was asking people who knew to fill in the gaps that I didn't have. And I'm not, and I always say this, I'm not an audio engineer. I'm not a sound engineer. Send me to a concert or anything like that, I didn't know what the hell I'm doing. I'd have an idea. But the goal was to make a podcast sound good, so I could offer the value I thought we had to offer. And I think we achieved that goal with our first podcast, because we got great feedback off it. It wasn't perfect, but that was the goal. Wasn't to be a sound engineer, and I'm not a sound engineer. And if someone, well, you're not even a sound engineer. Yeah, I know. I'm running a podcast studio. I like doing podcasts. So that was kind of my train of thought. I don't have to be an audio engineer to do something in this world. And loads of people are doing this now. Like, loads of people are teaching themselves skills online without going to school for it, which is great.
You see the likes of Skillshare and stuff, like they're
amazing.
Really big. Really, really valuable. I'd watch a good few of them now as well.
Like, I think there's great value in going to college and going to school, because it teaches you the discipline of learning, and it teaches you, but it's not the be all and end all. A degree isn't the be all and end all. It's great to get a degree, and it's great, like I have a degree, and it's great to be able to have something to fall back on if you need it, but some people would say that's almost a negative mentality, because it's a crutch for you then. With Skillshare and all these things online, you can learn new skills, and it doesn't mean that you're entitled to charge people for something because you watched a YouTube video, or you become an influencer online, you're an expert in nutrition because you watched a nutrition video. That's not what I'm saying. There is value to formal education, absolutely. But for things like this, the goal was to create something that sounds good. And I thought it sounded good, so I was like, well, and then other people thought it sounded good, and then lots of people thought it sounded good. I was like, okay, that mission achieved, like, and we'll figure out the rest on the way.
It just shows, like, if you put your mind to something, you can teach yourself anything.
It's a cliche,
and you
but
don't
it's true,
need, and you don't need, let's say, I think with our parents' generation, in terms of they didn't have YouTube, you know, if they were in your position, trained as an ATT, wanted to do podcasts, they'd have to go back to college.
Yeah.
There's not that resource.
There was no resource.
Yeah.
You're a fan of Gary Vee as well, aren't you? Gary
yeah,
Vaynerchuk.
massive.
He's big on this.
Yeah, and it's always about your side hustle. Like, I don't do journalism, media in college, but this is sort of, I call this my side hustle. This is my project. And it's funny, if I probably did journalism, media in college, I probably wouldn't. I'd be doing something else on the side.
Yeah.
It just shows, like, you know, your side hustle is kind of your passion and stuff.
Yeah. And again, I keep saying the word cliche, but that's almost a cliche nowadays. Everybody's an entrepreneur because everyone's doing drop shipping and making t-shirts and doing podcasts, whatever like that. But we are in an age where it's possible to make a living doing that. Yeah. And whatever, forget about making a living. I didn't start a podcast to make a living. I started a podcast because I enjoyed it and I thought we had value to offer. And in the clinic, I thought it was a way of helping our service. We were giving more information to people about the services that we did. So it doesn't. You don't have to start this thinking I need to be a professional podcaster or anything like that. There's so many things people start as their side hustle, as you say, because they just enjoy it. Like,
exactly.
And then what you'll find is as you do it, if there's an opportunity to make a business out of it there or become lucrative or whatever, then you'll go and do your due diligence and you'll do the bits and bobs you need to do. If you need to have a qualification, go and do it. But to start off, we have so many resources now, and this is. I laugh all the time. I always say this. We've everything at our fingertips. I'm touching my phone here. People can see this, but this thing in my hand, my phone, I can literally learn how to do heart surgery tomorrow. I'm not saying I'm going to do heart surgery tomorrow, but you could learn. I'm not just on YouTube. There's resources out there. There's medical books. Everything is online now. If you have the right mindset, you can learn it. But we spend our time watching cats falling off roofs and
TikTok
and stuff like that. So it's there's a bit of a conundrum there. But we have more resources than our parents ever had. But even like I'm 32 now. When I was in my teens, I didn't have access to any of this stuff. Yeah. Like our phones did nothing. Like you didn't access the internet. You dial up at home and you were downloading a song a day on LimeWire and destroying your parents' computer with viruses. But we didn't have those resources. So it's not out of this world to consider that you could do something now that you couldn't do 10 years ago. Yeah. Even if your parents don't really understand. Like my parents didn't know what I was doing with this studio. Like, what is a podcast? And they were like, I don't get it when they were listening to it first. It's a different generation. Yeah. But like,
and it kind of shows as well, like, if you put your mind to something or you want to do something, there's sort of no excuse. Like, I kind of had the thought of doing a podcast back in May. Now it's, what date is it now? 2nd of September. This is the 3rd episode that we're recording. And it was like, okay, I want to do it, but okay, I may as well just do it because there's no excuse. Like, I have all the resources online. I reached out to you because I know you quite well. I reached out to loads of people just asking their advice. Like, there's no excuse why I couldn't start a podcast, even though I'm not doing journalism. I don't have a degree in sound engineering. Yeah. You know, everything's online. Yeah.
You're ruining one of the answers to my questions. You're gonna ask me. There's loads of excuses, loads of them. Yeah. The million excuses why not to do it, but we'll get to why that's not a problem.
We'll get to that in a bit. And then in terms of, you know, going to start your own business, how big of a leap was that? You know, obviously you're going from somewhere you've worked for 10 years. You know, how big of a leap was it to go do your own thing?
I won't underplay it. It's big. It's huge. Part of my journey and my podcast and my value to offer, or what I try and do with my kind of media stuff, is explore the ways that people can improve their lives. And I always say this: my journey's selfish. I want to find out how to improve my life and my family's life. That's my kind of thing. I want to know how to be the best footballer and be the best boyfriend and be the best father and be the best or whatever I do. I want to learn how to do that. I'm not the best in any of them, but I want to learn. So in terms of that kind of, remind me the question again. I'm going way off topic here.
It was, how big of a leap was it?
Oh yeah. So the thing with starting a business, I knew I wanted to do this. I knew I wanted to grow my own thing. I wanted to follow my own journey, and I wanted to be true to all the stuff that I've been saying for years and listening to people say for years about taking that leap of faith and trusting yourself. And we'll go through some of the stuff now. We're going to talk about believing in yourself and all that kind of stuff. But when you're in it, it's a totally different story. Yeah. It's easy to talk about this stuff. Easy to run a podcast and preach about this. Easy to be an Instagram influencer. I'm not an Instagram influencer, but easy to do any of those things and not actually do it yourself. Say those things and not do it yourself. So to start a business, especially in today's world, there's a lot more resources for someone to start up their own thing, because there's a lot more things you can do. You can do stuff online you can never do before. But when you're in a job and you're thinking about going out on your own, and there's economic difficulties, and then there's coronavirus, and there's all this kind of stuff like that, it's difficult. It is difficult to do. So I won't underplay that, because you're always hearing things like, just do it, just start your business. It's a very, very difficult thing to do. And for a long time I didn't do it. And I've had ideas for 15 years that I haven't done any of them. because I was safe or secure, or I was happy where I was, and it's really hard to get yourself out of that safe space in your mindset. So to answer the question, it is hard. It is a leap. It's definitely a difficult thing to do. It's not for everybody. It doesn't mean that anybody who does it is any more special than anybody else. But if you find something that you think you really want to do and you don't do it, you're going to be miserable. My test is, if I'm on my deathbed and I did this thing or didn't do this thing, would I be upset?
Yeah.
And whenever I was thinking about this podcast thing and this project and offering value, like my thing wasn't I want to run a podcast. It's I want to build connections between people who have value to offer.
Yeah.
All the people I interview, I think they have massive value, and I want to build connections with those people. I do it through podcasts because it's easy for people to listen to and connect with that. But it's really for me to talk to these people, build networks, be able to help my dad if he's sick, to send them to such a person, be able to help my friend if they want to improve their 1 rep max in a squat, and I can send them to this person and build this big network of people that are helping each other. But it is a scary thing to make that decision that I'm going to rest my rent or my mortgage or my food in my mouth on this decision. So it is a scary thing to do. But if I didn't do this, I'd regret it forever.
Yeah.
And if a lot of people have these ideas and they don't want to do them because we're conditioned to go to school, go to college and get a job, there's nothing wrong with those things. If you're happy doing it, please do it forever, because it's a good way to live. It's secure, it's safe. Owning a business is not necessarily a smart decision unless you've got a great business idea. I didn't have a great business idea, but I had an idea and knew I wanted to do. And yeah, it's one of those things you kind of have to, it is just a blind leap of faith sometimes. You put your plan in place, you make your business plan, you talk to the people who know, you get your stuff organised, and then you've no more excuses. You kind of just have to pull the trigger and do it.
100%.
But like with stuff like this, you can start this as a side hustle. You're doing this as a side hustle.
Yeah.
And it might grow into something.
Yeah. And kind of what you're speaking about there, it's building the connections. I would find the podcast is nearly an excuse, for me to talk to these people, to talk to athletes. Like I play club football and basketball. I want to improve my game. I want to talk to athletes. I ask everyone their pre-game routine because that's something I struggle with, and I want to take their tips. And that's what, like you were saying, it's building those connections. It's having the conversations. And look, if I add value to someone else's life, like if I have one listener, that's great. If I have 100 listeners, that's great. I don't really care. If one person takes one takeaway from this, hour-long podcast, that's worth it to me. Yeah.
Like I said, my goal wasn't to build a podcast, and your goal, to build a business out of a podcast, and neither is yours. It was to talk to these people. It was completely selfish, and it developed into an idea for a business then after that, which is great. And like you look at other people, I'm going to drop a few names here because Philly McMahon was in the other day, not my podcast, was recording a podcast for a client of mine, and Philly's brilliant in terms of his overall presentation. Obviously he's a Dublin
fantastic podcast.
Yeah, a great listen, and like Philly speaks a lot, and it's always very interesting to hear, and he's got a great story, and he talks about his brother and his book and all that kind of stuff. But he's a businessman as well, and he runs gyms, and he's always been into business. There's just people like Philly, I'm just using him as one example, there's loads of people like Philly who take what they're good at and develop that into a business. And I think that's an important kind of pathway for some people. Other people have a great business idea and it mightn't be their passion. That's fine as well. And I'm not a businessman, don't get me wrong at all. I'm far from it. Like, I'm a brutal businessman if truth be told. But I had a passion and I wanted to follow it, and I developed into something. So it doesn't always have to be I'm going to leave my job now and I'm going to fly the flag, and I'm going to, because like that message is pushed a lot by the online, and Gary Vee says that a lot, and Rogan says that a lot. But there is a balance to be found there. Like, I'm all for the message. It's a great message. Do what makes you happy. But you have to pay the bills. We have a responsibility, especially if you've got family or people relying on you. Like, there's responsibility there as well. But it's not to say that you have to do something you're miserable at for the rest of your life. You have to be responsible. You have to be smart about it. But using Philly as an example, if you're good at something and you enjoy it and you have a good message to share, you can build a business on that as well. And I know Philly runs gyms and stuff too. Like, but he is passionate about health and fitness. He's passionate about strength and conditioning, performance, obviously, because he was
top performer,
well decorated Dublin star. Like, but there's many ways to skin a cat. But my big kind of go to the whole time is, would I regret doing this or not doing this on my deathbed? And if the answer to that is yes or no, and you're doing the opposite of what the answer is, you're not going to be happy unless you try something. So that was a real rambly way of answering the question again. We look to get this done in half an hour.
Yeah, exactly. And then in terms of then, setting up the business, was it long before you had clients come in and, kind of starting to get the revenue in? Were you long waiting for that?
Yeah. And again, my journey was slow because I was still working in a clinic when I set this up initially, and it was a side hustle, and it was for me initially at the start. It wasn't necessarily a great business decision to rent out a room straight away and start set up just sit there waiting for the clients to roll in. It doesn't just happen. But if you have a good message and you have a good thing about you, the nice thing about today is you've loads of platforms to get your message out there, or your brand out there, or your face out there. You've all the social media and stuff like that. The difficult thing is everyone else has the social media as well, so you're fighting a lot of noise. So I think an important thing, if you're expecting to generate revenue out of this, is to have a very, very good business plan and a marketing plan. And that's an area where I was weak, and I'll say that, and I'm still learning about that. But if you're expecting this to generate revenue, it's not doomed to fail, but it's almost going to hold you back.
Yeah.
With my idea at the start was just to run my own podcast. And then off the back of that, I was like, I'd like to set up a studio. I'd like to help other people, and just grew and grew and grew. But if I expected to make money off my own podcast, we're almost a year in now. I'm only 11 or 12 episodes in the new podcast. It was the second one I'm doing. Because all of a sudden that took a back seat because it's so much other stuff going on. But if I had pressure on me to make money off that, I'd have been forcing it. I'd been bringing in people I didn't necessarily want to bring in. I'd be scrambling really, really hard just to try and pay the bills, and that affects what you're actually trying to do. So there is that to think about it. If you're setting up a business and you want to make money off it, it doesn't necessarily align itself with your passion. You might need to take your time to develop your creative ideas, but you've bills to pay tomorrow. So there is pressure on, and it does take time to start generating revenue out of something like this. But if you have a good message and a good service, it'll come. So you need the confidence to be able to wait as well. But what's the practical side of that? If you're paying bills, whatever your bill, even if it's just putting petrol in your car, whatever those bills are, those bills don't stop just because you want to be a creative person or a YouTuber or a podcaster. Like, so I would always say, have your bases covered, but stick to your message and your guns. And if it is something that resonates with people and offers value, you'll probably do well out of it. Maybe you won't ever make money off it, but the chances are, if you're offering value, you'll find people who want to partake in that value. And for me, it was people wanted to rent the studio, they wanted my services, they wanted my production and editing services. I never think I'd say that, like, I'm not an audio guy. Well, now I am, but I wasn't an audio guy
5 years ago. You weren't.
But people want to pay me to do audio work for them, and the product is good and the service is good, and I feel confident charging for that. So it's that's kind of how the journey happened for me. But I'm sure you bring a businessman in here, he's going to tell you a totally different story. That's a brutal business idea, he never should have started it, he could have been here now. They're different conversations, like. But if you have a passion, there's no reason why you can't think of one day you might be able to monetize that passion. But be smart about it, because the revenue takes time to come, and that's with any business, but especially something like this.
And that's something that Gary does, talk a lot about. It's, you can monetize anything. He uses Pokemon, and AC/DC is a great example, the Pokemon podcast. And it's kind of like, you can monetize anything, but then again, you're saying be smart about it. Have your sort of your backseat, to fall on. Don't be putting 110%, because the bills won't stop.
And again, that can be interpreted so many ways. It's not to say that your idea is not good and you're never going to make money, and don't be confident in it. Do and aim for it. And if you want to make money off it, try and make money off it. Brilliant. And if you want to make money tomorrow off it, try and make money tomorrow off it. Why not? But don't worry, or don't expect it to happen immediately, or even ever. Don't expect that to be your main source of income, unless it's a really solid business idea and you're doing something that has all the bases covered and you know what you're doing. But the Pokemon thing and all that kind of stuff. And people laugh when they hear that, but what are you doing? You're offering value. What's anybody doing? What's a contractor doing? What's a bricklayer doing? They're offering a service that somebody else values, so they're willing to pay for it. It just because Pokemon, because your neighbour, your mom doesn't like Pokemon, doesn't mean that somebody in the world, you have access to the world now online, doesn't mean somebody else doesn't want your Pokemon expertise or whatever. There's I'd never discourage anybody from following an idea like that, but I would say have an element of kind of caution, or awareness if you're expecting to make money.
And then with your own podcast, you run the Primal Podcast, and that's all about health and
big plug there for the Primal Podcast.
There you go. So that's all about health and performance maybe, but it's sort of in a life, well-being, and improving your life. That's obviously your passion. You're involved in a lot of health. How did you obviously did your stuff with Dr. Sam. How did you kind of come up with the idea? Was it just because it was your passion, or did you kind of see from friends and family, I want to add value to their lives?
Both. My big thing is, I know that and everybody knows this, when you're feeling good, a lot more good stuff starts to happen to you. There's this weird, it's not weird, but there's a direct link between feeling good in yourself and physically and mentally, and good things happening, doing well in your job, doing well in your relationship, doing well in your sport, doing well in whatever. And when I was started listening to podcasts, and it was Joe Rogan's podcast was the first podcast I ever listened to, but through Joe Rogan's podcast, if there was loads of guests to come on, and I'd follow them and listen to their podcast and consume their content then, and I'd start to build. And also at the same time I was working in the clinic, and I had direct access to medical professionals, world experts in different areas, and nutrition and sport and performance and elite athletes and all this kind of stuff. So putting all that together, it was very obvious to me that if you take care of yourself in terms of your health, your physical and mental health, a lot of the other stuff, like even this business thing, you have a lot more energy to put into a business when you're feeling good and you're healthy. And I started to notice a lot of people, specifically the clients coming into the clinic, who on the outside seemed to be doing quite well, but there were broken people on the inside, like physically and mentally destroyed. And it was a huge percentage of people. And then I'd see friends and family in similar positions, and it was so many people, and then I'd feel the same sometimes. So many people were suffering with their general wellness and feeling good, and as a result, all of the outside bits of their lives were starting to suffer as well. Their performance, or their sport, or their career, their relationships. I've seen everything suffer with all the clients we dealt with in the clinic. So for me, that was a big motivation to not try and put the head down and hammer away at a specific thing, but to maybe pull it back a little bit and focus on how do I improve myself, my mental health and my physical health, because all the other things are going to come together a little bit easier, I'll have more energy to focus on them if I'm feeling a bit better. So that is essentially what my podcast or my journey is about. It's trying to find the people who have all this information and value to offer me, and that'll help me be better at what I do. But along the way, if I can take all that information I'm getting and help other people with that information, because what happened for years, because I've always been in the health industry, and I'm not a doctor and I'm not an expert in anything. I studied ATT and I worked in functional medicine, so I have experience in the medical world, but I'm not an expert in anything. But I speak to loads of experts all the time, and I would constantly have people, be it players, teammates, family, friends, asking me, such and such is wrong, what do you think? And it could be anything from I just sprained my ankle, how do I fix that, to I've got crippling depression, or my mum has cancer, or whatever. And I was, again, I'm not an expert in any of that, but I always seem to be able to have an answer that I've taken from somebody else to say, well, such and such a person reckons that this is a good way of going about this. Can I link you up with that person? And I'd always be like a referral machine. I'd just be sending people left, right and centre. And if I could help someone myself, I'd help them myself. And that was really powerful for me, and I got a lot from that. But by linking those people, I'd pull a bit of information out of that as well. So next time I sprain my ankle, I'd be like, oh, I don't know what to do now. Or the next time I got sick or had mental health issues or whatever, I'd be like, now I know what to do. So it was valuable for everybody. And that was really my goal then. That was my motivation to go down that route. So when people ask me what the podcast is about, it's kind of health and wellness, but it's deeper than that. It's about trying to find those tools that you can use yourself to feel really good, and that'll allow you then to build. And if it's, you want to be the best businessman or the best guitar player or the best dancer or whatever, the best mom, whatever it might be, you'll have a lot easier time doing that if you feel really good. And the big side note to that whole thing is everything we do nowadays in the world is kind of not designed, but it's focused on almost making us not feel good enough. You're not good enough, you're not rich enough, you're not powerful enough, you're not strong enough, you're not fit enough, you're not fast enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not whatever. So you're fighting this constant barrage. So I think building tools to be able to push that back a little bit and give yourself some breathing room, that's my goal for me and for my podcast and whatever. I'm not trying to change the world or anything like that, you know what I mean? Yeah,
I think in that sentence there, you just put together what Instagram is these days nearly. Now I'm not saying there's no positive things on Instagram, but I would, my feed is just, okay, I'm not going out enough with my friends, I'm not healthy enough, I'm not doing this, I'm not sleeping well enough, I'm not, whatever it is, like it's the constant comparison. So it's nice to have those kind of valuable things to listen to and kind of put those thoughts, not those thoughts back in your mind, but focus on myself, health and my wellness.
And if everybody did that, geez, the world would be a great place.
Yeah.
People would be in a much better place. It's so competitive and aggressive now because we're being told you have to compete with everybody. Have you ever heard of a podcast called The Happiness Lab with Dr. Lara Santos?
No.
And again, this is only recommend. This is how I do things.
Yeah.
I didn't know about this until about 3 weeks ago. A friend of mine recommended it to me. And it's brilliant. I'm only 3 or 4 episodes in, but she's essentially, I think she's Yale. She's Yale or Harvard, and she's a professor. But she in a nutshell, she started a course on the psychology of happiness, and it was so successful she made a podcast out of it. And I'm listening to the podcast now, and they literally just spoke about that, the comparison syndrome.
Yeah.
It's to compare yourself to somebody else is normal, and it's usually your friends and your peers and your small circle. But now you're comparing yourself to 7 billion people.
Yeah.
online, and there's always going to be somebody who you perceive as better than you, so that's always going to make you unhappy, unless you can frame it differently for yourself. So my thing is, if I can be happier generally in my day to day, and a lot of that comes from literally physiology, like if I can eat right and sleep right, whatever about just be happy and big thumbs up and smiley face, if I can eat right and sleep right and have good practices for breathing and mental health and all that kind of stuff, I'll then be able to look at Instagram and go, well, do you know what, I'm actually feeling really good, so that comparison doesn't really affect me as much, because it's always going to be there. I'm never going to beat the comparison. I'm not one of these like, Instagram is terrible, the world is terrible.
Oh, I'm not either. It's just funny, that sentence, you put together my experience currently on Instagram. That's
what it is. It is what it is, and that resonates with you, and it'll resonate with everybody. But your frame of mind when you're interacting with this, we just spoke for 20 minutes about how great the internet is and all these different platforms are. Like, it's great. It is great. But only if you're in the right mindset or the right frame of mind to be able to interact with it. Like
100%.
And people call me a conspiracy theorist. I love talking about conspiracies and stuff like that. And I genuinely believe there's an element of something out there that's not necessarily good for us. Like, everybody doesn't have our best interest at heart. The bank doesn't. The government doesn't necessarily have our best interest at heart. They're all designed to support themselves. That's a conspiracy theory, quote unquote. And people say, what are you going to do, Dan? You're going to hide under your stairs with a tinfoil hat? I said, no. You need to acknowledge that all that stuff exists, that it's not necessarily good for you, and you interact with it differently. Then you can live your life. I pay my bills, and I drive a car, and I have a phone, and we're sitting here in a nice studio and all that I love all that kind of stuff. I'm not anti-capitalist or anything like that. We're getting way off topic here. But anyway, the whole thing is, if you can develop a good, strong sense of yourself, it's like you're an athlete. Develop a good core, and all the peripheral stuff takes care of itself. Develop a good core of health and wellness, and all the good stuff. All the rest of it is much easier to take care of.
I always think of it sort of like Jenga. Like, take one of the bottom blocks out, and you're starting to get, it's starting to wobble a bit. You see maybe your performance dip, maybe your work life, whatever. Take another one out, the whole thing could nearly topple on you. It's trying to get that balance and trying to slide the blocks back in, keep a good foundation.
I'm going to be careful with me. I'm going to rob that now. I'm
there
going to claim that as my own phrase. This is how I do things. How I build my value. I'm going to rob it from you, and I'm going to give it to someone else. That's a great way of putting it.
And then in terms of about your own podcast, you've had a load of guests on, really, really valuable stuff. Is there any sort of big takeaways or tips you've taken from those guests in particular?
The big one, and I bang on about this all the time, and it kind of it started to shape itself in my head really, really early on, and every guest has come on has kind of fed into it, is that you have to build practices. Being passive is not good enough for anybody. This whole it'll be grand thing, if you are in a place that you don't want to be, or you're not happy with, and that could be anything. I'm not talking just about mental health. I'm talking about your sport, or your relationship, or your life, or your career, or your health especially, and you're in a place that you don't want to be in. Being passive is not good enough. You don't have to being negative is obviously bad, but being passive is not good enough. All of these people I've had on have all said similar things to me from completely different backgrounds and careers. They've all said the same thing, essentially, is that you have to build practices for yourself, things that you do, and I make it real simple for myself to understand it. You just have to do things, and it doesn't mean put your head down and just plow on. It means you have to find things that you can do that are good for you, that benefit you, that make you feel good, that make you healthy. And it's not the same for everybody. There is no quick fix. There's no, well, we all know that you should eat your green vegetables. Like I tell a story, Owen Lacey was on my podcast, and he told me before that he had a client who was allergic to green vegetables. If she ate green vegetables, she'd die. She'd have a massive allergic reaction. So everyone shouldn't just eat green vegetables. Now that's a really extreme example, but everyone needs to find, or can find, their own thing. I talk about the cup of tea. I love having a cup of tea, and I would just spend 3 minutes just going, this is a great cup of tea. And I try not to think about anything else. And it seems really stupid and simple, but it kind of resets my day for me. The gym is like that for some people, going for a walk, going for a swim, doing breathing exercises, meditating, painting your nails, jumping up and down, whatever. Everybody can find small things. And the big thing all of these people I've listened to have kind of said, and anyone who inspires me, is they always start off with, it's a cliche, but they start off with one small thing. And then they do another small thing. And then all of a sudden you're looking at them and they're an Olympic athlete or something like that. But it was just all these small little things they did. And a lot of people think that just happens. Well, that could never be me. Start with a cup of tea or a walk, or that was my big takeaway, is just start doing small things that are positive. Not just anything and just go, I'm going to do anything now. Find the things that work for you, that make you happy, or that don't make you sad, or that inspire you or lift you up. This sounds really like Hallmark t-shirt stuff, but I've got this message from all these elite people, so it's really been hammered home in my head. Small things, and start them, and just do it. Start them, and that starts to build. That's how this happened for me. Like, I'm not even close to where I want to be, but that's how this, a small thing. I like podcasts. Maybe I want to do a podcast. Maybe I'll try a podcast under a bed sheet. Oh, that was terrible, but let me do another, and it made me feel good. Maybe I'll talk to this person. Oh, it makes me real nervous, and I want to talk. No, I'm just going to call this person. Actually, really nice. Oh, now I can call another person on a day. But that's kind of for me. And then it was the cup of tea and a walk, and then going for a run and going to the gym and playing GAN. All these tools people have built for themselves help them get to the places that they're going.
Yeah.
But if you're passive and you just think it's going to happen because you're entitled to it, you deserve it or whatever, or you don't have the motivation to do it, it won't happen. And that's the overriding message from everybody that I've gotten. And they all say it in some different way. They all say the same thing. I just hear that same thing over and over again. Yeah.
Definitely one of the things I've taken away from you is the non-negotiable, because I'd be one of those
from
like,
you, yeah.
Yeah, it's oh my God, I have this big massive to-do list. I have to do my mindfulness, my exercise, my walk, my gym. Drew Hennessy, he does a podcast and he was on with you.
Yeah.
He said he has his non-negotiable. He started off with one non-negotiable, and that just clicked in my mind because I was worrying so much about getting 10 things done in a day to improve my wellness. But sure, my wellness was deteriorating because I was trying so much to do these 10 things.
Yeah.
You know, you just start with one. It's the one non-negotiable, and that's worked brilliant for me. I'm still on one. Haven't gotten to 2 yet.
Sure, I'm only on 1 or 2 now, and I bang on about this stuff on podcasts all the time.
But it's having that to-do list, but it's focusing on the one thing. Okay, what am I going to do to start? And then I'm going to build it up. Again, not being passive. Start off with one and build it up.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to, people think this has to be a really technical, hard, difficult thing.
Yeah.
Pick the easiest thing you can think of, the thing that you like the most. It's not the same as in the gym, work on your weaknesses. That all comes. Pick the easiest thing, the path of least resistance for you, and do that first. Yeah. Because you'll enjoy it and you know it's easy to do.
Exactly.
When you do that, you're going to feel, you've heard this Navy SEAL thing with the Marines. There's a famous speech about make your bed.
Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
That's so powerful. And I say that in front of some of my friends, they roll their eyes. And I'm like, no, I get it. I get the roll eyes thing. Yeah. I do get it. Like, and there's a lot of this stuff on Instagram now, hang in there, kiddie kind of quotes, motivational quotes, and everybody's a motivational expert now on Instagram. Yeah. But it's so powerful when you do that. One, you get that small win first thing in the morning, and that's just a metaphor. Make your bed, whatever. Do something that's a small win that you can do every single day, and that is going to springboard you to another small win. Yeah. And all those small wins add up. I promise you, they all add up. Yeah. And you felt that. I felt that. Everybody
100%.
everybody listening here has felt that in some way. But it's about being consistent with that is the key, because everybody has had good days and bad days. But a lot more people now have a lot more bad days than good days. And that's just an observation. It's not being negative. But having those small wins consistently, making the bed or going for the walk or having a cup of tea or whatever it is it's that little snowball at the start. Another cliche. All these cliches come from somewhere. Yeah. And it just spirals into something bigger. Yeah. Yeah.
That I'm going to try link that speech, because that's brilliant. And he explains it really well. Yeah. It's you know, when you've had a hard day, you come home to your bed and it's made and you just jump in it. Like, it's fantastic. He explains it really, really well. And it's something I've done, and it is quite beneficial. And then in terms of, you spoke a lot about Joe Rogan. Who would be your dream? Who would be your dream guest?
Just answered the question before you even ask it.
Is Joe Rogan the dream guest?
Do you know what?
If you had your pick, you know yourself.
If I had my pick of anybody, it would be Rogan. And again, like he's the most popular podcaster in the world. He's number one, but he's number one for a reason. I really like him. People like him for different reasons. Some people hate him. He's like Marmite, like, and some people say, he's such a cliche. He's this kind of masochistic, male, testosterone-driven, gym monkey kind of guy. I don't like Rogan because I think he's the oracle and like that. I just think he has a really, really nice way of being true to himself, of asking questions. Some podcasts I listen to him, like I thought he was brutal on that podcast because whatever. I'm not in love with Joe Rogan, but I think his whole quest for answers, he's doing something that kind of inspired me to do what I'm doing. He's looking for answers. He wants to know this stuff. I get a feeling listening to his podcast that he actually wants to know this, and many times he asks a question just before it comes out. I'm sitting there listening, I was like, I wish he'd ask this, and then he asked the question. So that's why I like it. I understand why people don't like it. People have different views on this guy. It was the first podcast I listened to. His guests are incredible. He's such a big profile, which helps that he gets these incredible guests on, and you hear a side of people, actors and doctors and experts and all these people that you only ever see from a distance, and you get 5-minute snippets and interviews with. I think that's what really attracted me to the podcast forum and to Rogan specifically, was the long forum. I love a long forum. Now, I'm not mad for 5 hours. His latest one there with Duncan Truss was like 5.5 hours. Like, I can't
nobody has time for that.
I'm gonna have to listen to that over the next 3 weeks. Like, but a lot of his episodes I don't listen to. I have no interest. I like MMA, but I've no interest in listening to the 3-hour MMA episodes or the comedians or anything like that. I'm looking for value out of it. I have time. I want to listen to something that's going to add value to my life. But I like the long form where you get someone who gets to come in and actually sit down in front of you. Like, imagine we tried to do this interview in 5 minutes. Yeah. people be like, your man's an awful bell end, isn't he?
Yeah.
Thinks
Sure, we don't even still be on the first question.
We still will be on the first question. Yeah. He thinks he knows this about, but like I've said to him many times now, I don't know much about any of this stuff, but the goal is to keep at it and to learn more. And if I can offer value doing that, you're doing the exact same thing as me.
Yeah.
So that's the goal. But if you had 5 minutes at me, you think, oh, your man's a bit of a bell end.
Yeah.
And it's the same with some of these people you see that Rogan has on. When you get the 5 minutes, which is all you really get, on the traditional media forums like your TV interviews and your radio interviews and all that kind of stuff, you get 5 minutes and it's sound bites. All you're getting is sound bites, and they're programmed to say certain things, and you can even see the people themselves rolling their eyes thinking, I know this is going to be interpreted whatever way the media wants to interpret it.
Yeah.
What really appealed to me about Rogan was you could have 2 or 3 hours and he wouldn't stop the interview until the person had either made their point or he'd gotten what he wanted out of them, which was the information, and he'd let them tell their story, and you just hear some incredible stuff. So that really inspired me to love his show, and that was 5 or 6 years ago, and I know there's people listening to Rogan for 10 years, like, but that if I was to have a guest on my podcast, I don't even know what I'd ask the fella, like, and he doesn't do any podcasts, which is interesting. He doesn't do other people's shows. He might have done Joey Diaz's once or twice and a couple of others but he doesn't do other podcasts, and he doesn't really do appearances, and he doesn't do interviews and stuff like that. Like, they're very rare when he does do them, very rare. So you don't really get a lot of him in his own podcast. He talks about himself a lot. But
you don't get you get the snippets he gives you don't get the broader picture.
Yeah, and he's in control, so you'd love him not to be in control. Although I'd imagine you bring him in here, it'd just be the Joe Rogan podcast with Dan Campion. It wouldn't be my podcast. But yeah, that would probably be, it's cliched, but that'd probably be my guess. I'd say that has been answered thousands of times the same way.
Probably. And then in terms of, setting up your podcast, did you ever worry about what people think? I'm sort of at the age that, oh my God, like, I haven't even released any episode yet, and I'm already worried, and I know clicking the publish button for the first episode is going to be awful. It's going to take me half an hour to do, because it's awful. Like, it's you worry so much about what other people think. Did you ever have those thoughts or those feelings?
What do you mean you're of the age? We're about the same age. Maybe a decade in the difference. Every day. You have that every day. I remember we spoke when you came in months ago now. We had this conversation and you asked the same question. It's when you're putting something about, like, I asked you today, why are you interviewing me? Like, I don't particularly think I'm that interesting like that. And that's a constant thing in the back of my mind. And like with my podcast, and my podcast isn't particularly successful. I really enjoy doing my podcast. I get loads of value, and so do my listeners. But it's a small listener base we have. It's not everyone listening now probably has never heard of my podcast. That doesn't bother me now. I had a conversation with myself at the very start, and I'm a very private person. And you wouldn't think if every time someone gets me on mic, what are we now? 47 minutes. You can't shut me up whenever you get me on mic, like. But I tend not to. I'll give my opinion when people ask me for it, like.
Or when people don't ask me for it.
When people don't ask me for it, I give my opinion too, But I had a conversation with myself at the start, because I was very worried about, I'm going to go on mic here now, and I don't want to come across as a fraud to anybody, because I hope I'm the same with everybody. Now, I change slightly. Everyone changes slightly depending on the environment they're in. People laugh when they see me on a gar pitch. They call me a tug, like. And then they see me in the clinic, and I'm like, how you doing? How are you? And my name is Dan. And people do that. That's normal. But I like to think that I'm kind of I am who I am with most people. And some people can call me out on that if they want, but I think that's who I am. But my big thing is when I go on mic is, like, I'm worried about what people will think of me, because I'm a human being. Like, I like to say I don't really care what people think. Everyone cares what people think. That's just a fact of life. So I do, and I was nervous about that. I was nervous about being a fraud. I still, like, you asked me come to the podcast, I'm like, but I'm a bit of a fraud. I'm not even a sound engineer. Exactly. What am I? I'm not even anything. I have that every single day. This imposter syndrome, I have that every single day as well. And I'm only small scale. Imagine if I was running a successful podcast, there was hundreds of thousands of listeners or anything like that. I think that imposter syndrome, I think that's natural as well. So I have it all the time. But the conversation I had with myself at the start is, I have to be happy, because like I'm just myself. My podcast, I've been really good today, but I curse and all that kind of stuff. It's just I'm not being derogatory or anything like that. But I had my conversation. I have to be happy that my girlfriend's mom could listen to this, or one of the lads I play football against could listen to this, or someone I work with could listen to this, and I'm the same person for everybody, and the information is valuable to all those people. And once I'm happy that I'm trying to achieve that, that'll give me a lot of confidence to actually press that publish button and put it out there. So I had that conversation loads of times at the start, and like I said to you, it took me years to do anything like this. I love YouTube and videos and media, and I never wanted to. I was like, I don't want to do any of that. Like, people are going to judge me, and it's a judgmental world. But it's the same thing as we said about Instagram. I'm trying to build this thing in my head that I'm confident and happy in what I'm doing. I don't think it's right or anything like that, but I'm confident and happy with what I'm doing. And that gives me the breathing room to let other people judge me and whatever. Like, people probably do hate listening to me, and people probably do say, geez, he talks too much on the podcast. And whatever. I'm happy. My guests are always happy. I really enjoy what I'm doing. I enjoy the work I do now, helping other people run their podcasts. I enjoy everything about what I'm doing. So I don't mind now putting that out there.
Yeah.
And my goal is to try and help. My goal isn't to get famous. I don't want to be famous. I think it'd be brutal to be famous.
Yeah, it'd be awful.
It'd be brutal.
Yeah.
So my goal is to help other people. And I know people like to engage with podcasts and know who you are. So I'm starting to put a little, like, if you look at my social, it's awful. You probably don't even know I exist. If you look at my
Your
personal
face is
Instagram.
barely in it, yeah.
My personal Instagram, there's nothing on it. No one knows who I am, like. And I like it that way. But I know people like to engage as well. I love to engage. This is why I like the Rogan Podcast, because I get to see this person behind the scene. This is who they really are, and I connect with that. So I have to learn to be comfortable with that. But it's every day. Like, even now, it's still every time I go publish, I'm like, oh, people are gonna hate this. It's gonna be brutal. Yeah. I edited a podcast, put it up on YouTube yesterday, and I was like, oh, that's awful. I hate that. But it's like, I'm at the place where I'm right. But I feel pretty good. I'm happy. I'm actually happy. When I sit back and I'm just looking at this through someone else's eyes, I'm happy with what I did publish, and it gets a little bit easier. Yeah. I think there's a fine line though between that getting a bit easier and then getting really cocky, thinking everyone's going to love everything you do. If I hit that point, please come and tell me.
Yeah. Oh, I will. I'll let you know.
Come and let me know. Yeah. I don't think I'm there yet. Maybe I am. Your listeners will tell you, who was your man? Don't get him on again.
Exactly. Yeah. It's something I was asking. Obviously, before, it took me a while to, when I had the idea for the podcast, actually execute it, and I got in touch with a lot of people. I got in touch with yourself and a couple of people to kind of ask their advice. And one of them, it was actually the other day, they said a brilliant quote to me. It was something along the lines of recognizing the fear and living with it. You know, I was saying, God, I'm going to be mortified if certain people find it, and certain people listening, if they're listening now, they'll know that I'll be mortified if they tell me they listen. Yeah. But like, it's recognizing the fear. Oh my God, if someone brought that up to me in a social setting, I would die right in front of them. But it's living with that fear. It's okay, look, if they bring it up, they bring it up. I'm living with it, like, but recognizing it and just going for it. And why not? Like, you know, as you said, on your deathbed, are you going to regret, you know, what you've done? If not, then just go for it. You know, that's
what bravery is. I learned this years ago because I was a real nervous kid. I still am a angsty kind of nervous person. Like, bravery isn't not being afraid of doing something. Yeah. Bravery is being afraid of doing something and doing it anyway. That's what I think is brave. If you're not afraid of something, it's not brave to do it. Like, but if something freaks you out and you do it anyway, that's brave. Yeah. That's what I think bravery is. So like, all of this stuff freaks me out. Like, coming on your podcast today, I told you I was nervous. I'm playing GAT 25 years. I get nervous at every single game. Yeah. Going on the pitch is my way of conquering that. And when I conquer that, I feel good. And I'm not saying I'm brave, but that's my version of it. That gives me confidence. If I wasn't afraid of something and I did it, I'd be like, there's nothing in that. Like, you can do anything that you're not afraid of. Yeah, 100%. That's not brave. But bravery is definitely doing something that you're afraid of.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Yes Theory. Not sure if you heard of them, but their
they're brilliant. Yeah,
their whole line is seek discomfort.
Seek discomfort.
Like, they put themselves completely out of their comfort zone.
Yeah. Now they're way on the other end of the scale.
I've been watching them. I think that they had less than 5,000 subscribers. Like, they were really early when I got in. Now? They're like a couple of million. They actually launched their very own podcast yesterday, or it's coming out soon. Yeah, so there you go. Podcast is going to be
more podcasts to listen to.
Yeah, there you go. But their line is seek discomfort, and 100%. Like, it's, and I've watching them for years, and I've always said, God, I'd love to do that. Love to do this and this and this. And I kind of just reached a stage of, you know what, just do it. Just live with the fear and just go for it.
Yeah, 100%.
It just shows. Yeah. And then in terms of your own podcast, do you have any sort of goals with it? Are you just doing for the value? Is there any numbers you want to hit? Or anything like that?
No, I'm not a number. It's very easy to get seduced by the numbers. And like, in my head, I'd love if the podcast blew up tomorrow and I got millions of listens and I'm making money off it and I can do a podcast for the rest of my life like Joe Rogan. Like, everybody wants that. Like, that'd be great. But only because I'm passionate about it. I love it. I love what I'm doing. I don't want to be famous. So the millions, there's a kind of a conflict there in my head. Do I want millions of listens, or that kind of makes you famous? I don't really want that, but in a way I kind of do as well, because that's attractive to everybody. It's a measure of success in today's world, even though it shouldn't be.
How famous you are.
How famous you are, how many followers you have. And I really struggle with that. Like, it almost, I'm allergic to that. Yeah. That concept of people tying themselves to their numbers or their followers. I think it's really dangerous, but it's attractive and it's designed to be attractive. Yeah. So my goal for the podcast is, as soon as I stop enjoying it, I'm never going to do it. I'm not looking for a number. If I could build it up and it was big and I could get advertising and sponsorship and cover it and it didn't cost me anything to do it, amazing. That's brilliant, because I could do what I love. If I could spend the rest of my life podcasting and talking to people like you or people who offer value, that's what I want to do. Brilliant. I like, love what you do. I would love doing that. That'd be amazing. And as soon as I stop loving it, I'm going to stop doing it. The goal for the podcast is to keep offering value. And like I said to you there, I say to everybody, as soon as that turns into a circus where I'm either trying to look for followers or listens or likes, or I'm bringing on guests that don't really offer value, or I change in some way,
or you pay for someone to come on, that's a big thing.
I said to you at the start, you said you pay these people to come on. I'm never paying anybody to come on this podcast, because they can come on if they want it.
Yeah.
And if they want, and if I want them on and they want to come on, that's a good mix for me, because I'm sitting here 2 meters from you.
There you go. Social distancing.
And I get to look you in the eye. We get to have a conversation. If you wanted to do this and I wanted to do this, so we're having a good conversation, I think. And my guests are the same. I'll never pay anybody to come on, because all you're buying into this model. Then if I need this person to come on because they're going to bring more followers, or they have a high profile. Maybe high profile people will come on my podcast. Maybe they won't. I've already had a couple of high profile people, relatively so, in the industries I enjoy. But I won't pay anybody. I'll keep doing it until I stop enjoying it. Which I hope will be never, because I love having these conversations.
Yeah.
And if it becomes, if my podcast specifically becomes a viable business option, I don't see a problem with monetizing it like that. But I'll always try and keep it exactly what it is. It's to offer value to people. It's not about the money or the listens or the follows. That's benefit. And no one's going to have a go at you for making money off something you enjoy doing. Once you stick to the goals. No one's ever offered me €1 million before, so it might be different tomorrow.
Exactly.
But I like to think like everybody does. None of that
stick
stuff.
to your morals.
If that ever happened, on the off chance any of that ever happened, and there was offers or anything like that, I want the podcast to be what I want it to be.
Yeah.
And then there's a business side to what I do as well. I do studio rental and production, so that kind of takes the pressure off me having to make this podcast monetizable. And maybe I don't even have a formula that people like. Maybe it could never be something that people would listen to. So for me, it's a personal journey. I enjoy it, and it offers value to a small amount of people, me included. So that's kind of my goal for it, to keep doing that. And if that grows, great. If it doesn't, I'm not going to worry about that. I'll do it until I stop enjoying it.
Yeah, fantastic. And then in terms of using your expertise and your knowledge, for people who want to start a podcast, what advice would you give them? Is it just do it, or is there any like sort of big do's and don'ts for podcasting?
Don't do it to make money. And like anyone who's passionate about their job says the same thing. Doctors say that all the time. I've worked around doctors for 15 years. They all say the same thing. Don't become a doctor to make money. Doctors can make good money, but you become a doctor because you want to help people. And you make some money but doctors aren't rich. Like, this is a common misconception. Like, it's a difficult thing to be a doctor, especially in this country. Very, very difficult thing. So don't do it to make money. Do it, as we had this conversation earlier as well, do it because you're passionate about it and you want to do it, even if you don't think you have a huge amount of value to offer, but you want to do a podcast, you want to start a YouTube channel, or you want to write a book, or you want to, like, I'm talking about all the modern stuff, you want to do anything, I would do it. But don't think this is going to be a business, and don't fall into the trap of this is how easy it is to get a 1,000 listens and get a sponsorship deal and all that kind of stuff. That can definitely happen, and it'd be great if it does, and everybody could do that. But don't build your house on that. Start this because it's passion, because you enjoy it, because you want to do it, because it's going to give you joy every day, because it's going to be one of those things in your day, one of those tools you use to make yourself and other people feel better. That's why you should start the podcast. And if you do that, I find you'll probably be successful, because then you're going to be real authentic. Everyone loves that word. You're going to be real authentic to yourself, and people are going to pick up on that and they're going to engage with that. People are very, very aware now of being sold something. They're very aware of what's fake and what's not real. So start something because you really love it. Again, this sounds like a Hallmark card, but it's really, really important. Only do it if you really want to do it, and if you're passionate about it, and if you don't mind spending the time on it, you're going to have to spend on it. And I'm not saying you're going to have to crush yourself for millions of hours just to get something to work, but you're not going to enjoy doing it if you have to stay till 11 o'clock one night and edit a podcast. You're not going to enjoy that if you don't actually enjoy what you're doing. So that's, for me, that is the number one rule. You have to be passionate about if you're going to do anything like this, you have to really enjoy it, because it's going to show up everywhere if you don't enjoy it, or if you're only doing it for a certain reason. And your listeners will know as well. They'll know straight away.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's no way you can hold an hour-long conversation with someone and then not figure out that they're only in this for A, B, or C. Like you get it really quickly. Like you get to understand that people actually enjoy doing what they're doing, and you engage with that. That's why I engage with Rogan and with his guests and with all the podcasts I listen to, because they really seem like they're enjoying it. And I'm like, oh Jesus, well, I'm in this one too. I feel like I'm in the conversation now.
Exactly. And then everyone has a tendency, when they want to start a podcast, they're going to go out and buy the most expensive mic and the most expensive computer they'll ever find. what equipment do you recommend? Because I know you have a big gripe with the Blue Yeti microphones.
I don't have a gripe. Again, I'm not a sound engineer.
Yeah.
Like I'm not. And again, I have the YouTube degree, and
Yeah.
a lot of stuff is listening to reviews of people who know what they're doing. I went into a few studios. I looked at the kind of stuff. There's a few basic rules, like there is with anything.
Yeah.
With podcasting, this kind of forum. There's three types of mics, really broad speaking. But there's two types of mics people are looking at: it's condenser mics and dynamic mics. For something like this, where we're sitting in the same room and you're having two people having a conversation, you want to have dynamic mics because they're just better for spoken word and they don't pick up a lot of the extra noise in the room and stuff like that. There's loads of them. Like we looked at loads of options for you specifically. You don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds of euros. Please don't spend hundreds and hundreds of euros to start. You don't need to do that. There's much more important things with starting a podcast and audio than the equipment. The equipment is important and it's nice. I love gear. I'm a gear junkie. Like I like nice gear and nice stuff like that. But you don't want to sink money into this at the start. It's a passion project. It's not all about the gear. Like photographers and videographers say that all the time because everyone, what's the next camera coming out? What's the next mic coming out? It's not about that. It's about number one, people aren't going to listen to you if you've no passion and you haven't got a good subject and decent guests. With the gear, dynamic mic, but even more important than that is the room you're recording in and your mic technique. And like bad audio, people will tolerate bad video if the content's good, but very few people will tolerate bad audio. The audio needs to be of a certain standard, and you don't need a 200-300 euro mic. Like the Shure SM7B is,
the
you
most
see that
popular
everywhere. It's only 400 quid mic, like, and that's only for one of them. You need two, like you're up to nearly $1,000 there. You don't need anything like that. You can get a 50 quid mic. You can do it with your iPhone microphone at the start.
The Apple wired earphones.
They're quite good. Like all that stuff is quite good to start off and see if you like it. But in essence, you want something that is going to you want an environment, and that includes the gear that's conducive to recording audio. So if you have a lot of background noise, if you have a big open room, it's not going to sound nice or professional. If your mic technique isn't great, it's not going to sound nice or professional. The mic itself is kind of important, but not really. Like editing and computers and all that kind of stuff, it's not really that important unless you're into really high end stuff. Your start point of podcast is find the environment, make sure you are comfortable, your guest is comfortable, have a nice format, offer some value. With your environment, make sure you kill all the flat surfaces and anything that's going to reflect sound, because sound is a wave. Obviously, you don't want anything bouncing back. You don't want echo. You don't want ambient noise. You don't want air conditioners or kids in the background or anything like that. That's way more important. Like, I won't get into the technical details around the podcast, but that's way more important than the actual gear. But if you are looking at microphones and gear and stuff like that, like, you don't need to spend more than 60 or 70 quid on a really good quality dynamic microphone. Try and stay like the Blue Yeti thing. People don't like Blue Yetis. Some people have an issue with the quality of Blue Yeti, but in essence it's a condenser mic, so it's different. To give people an idea, when you see people recording music in a studio, you'll almost always see them with a condenser mic. When you see people in radio stations, you almost always see them with dynamic mics, and dynamic mics just pick up your voice in a very narrow pattern, so it focuses on your voice and not a lot of the other noise in the room. That's a very, very basic explanation of what it is. It's much better for podcasting and spoken word. That's kind of really all you need to focus on at the start. There's loads of reviews online about the best cheap dynamic mics to start podcasts. There's loads of audio interfaces to plug into your computer, but you can do this with Zoom and headphones. Now my thing is, if you really want people to engage with your podcast, just take a slight bump in quality. So don't use your Apple earphones. Spend 50 or 60 quid on a mic. And that's it. A mic and a cable and some sort of interface with your computer, and that's it. And then just focus on all of the other stuff, like, are you offering value? Do you enjoy it? Is the room good? Have you got good? Because you can build a little studio in your house for free with your pillows and your duvets. Like, that's what I did. And you don't need to spend any money on any of that, and that is going to boost your production quality 1,000,000 times more than having the latest 400 euro mic. Like, and usually if you have the latest 400 euro mic, you're focusing too much on that and thinking it's going to make you sound good. It almost never does.
Exactly.
It's like, if you've ever seen someone with a really expensive digital camera and you look at the pictures and they're brutal, and then someone with a real, like, their iPhone can take the most gorgeous pictures. Like, it's about knowing how to understanding, like, photography is understanding light. Photography is light, literally. That is, if you understand light, you can be a good photographer. Doing podcast is understanding, number one, sound, but that's a really small part of it. Is the sound good quality? Is there a lot of background noise or hiss or like that? Get rid of all that. Fine. Now you're a podcast expert, essentially. all of the rest of it should be focused on value.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be thinking about the mic or the earphones or anything like that. Once you have kind of something basic enough dialed in, think about your guest, think about your audience, think about the value, think about, are you enjoying this? Why are you doing it? That's a lot more important. That's a really kind of, people hate that answer because they want to know what's the best mic.
Exactly.
There is no
throw
best
money
mic.
out. Like,
they want to throw money on it. There is no way. That's a quick fix. People love quick fixes and biohacks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't really exist. It can help a little bit, but the most important thing is the environment you're recording in, and that includes, are you comfortable? Are you happy? Are you warm? Is there background noise? Stuff like that. That's way more important.
And did it take you a while to get comfortable behind the mic? Because I would find, like, this is my 3rd episode recording. I'm only starting to kind of get to grips with how to speak on a mic, how to kind of engage with guests. Did that take you a while?
It is a learned skill. It's like being on TV. Not that I've ever been on TV. Well, I've been on TV a couple of times for small extra roles in RTE productions. It's the same as anything. It's something you have to practice. You do have to practice mic technique. You do have to practice interview. I didn't study interview technique or anything like that, but I've had conversations for 32 years of my life. I wasn't speaking when I was 1, but I like having conversations, and I'm comfortable having conversations with people. So I didn't even think about the interview technique, and I kind of made a little list about when I should ask this question, but then I forgot all about that, and I just had conversations with people. That's my style. If you have a style of podcast, or you want to get information out of somebody, or you want a short amount of time, you need a bit more technique to it. But in terms of the technical side of actually being behind the mic and recording the podcast, you do need to practice it and become comfortable with it, because the only way you're going to be you is if you're comfortable with it. I listened back to the first couple of episodes I did years ago on the Regeneration part. I was like, who is your man? Because I put on this accent, this weird kind of posh accent, and I was doing it, and I was too far away from the microphone, and there's all sorts of stuff. I said, that doesn't even sound like me. So to get to a point, all you're trying to do is get to a point where you sound like you. And that's different for everybody, but it takes a bit of practice just to be comfortable with it. It's like if I pointed a camera at you right now and said, right, go, and you're being videoed, you turn into like a weird. Did you ever see Will Ferrell in Talladega Nights, and he's being interviewed, and his hands keep coming into the screen? He's like, I don't know what to do with my hands. There's a skill involved in being in front of a 100%. Lens. There's a skill involved in being behind the microphone as well. And it's not a difficult thing to learn. I'm not trying to pump this up into, we're all experts here. You need to learn your trade. You need to practice a little bit, whatever you do, to make sure you're comfortable. And once you're comfortable, you're flying. That's the most important thing. Make sure you're comfortable. Yeah,
100%. Since starting this podcast, I've mad respect for anyone that goes behind the mic. Behind the camera is amazing, because geez, I couldn't do video podcasts.
Not yet.
Well, not for a good while. But behind the mic is it's a skill you have to learn, and it's something, I'm gonna look back on my first few episodes and cringe. Oh my god, what is she doing?
I still look at my episodes from last week. I'm like,
I know. I recorded one yesterday, and I haven't even listened back to it yet, because I'm just gonna hate myself. But anyway, and then what is sort of the biggest mistake you see people do on their podcasts?
Again, like, I feel I have the imposter syndrome talking about this kind of stuff, because I'm not the expert. I'm not a famous anything or well respected podcaster or anything like that. But the things that I see, number one is that quality, that audio quality. That is the biggest thing, the biggest mistake I see. I would spend a lot more time not investing in equipment, investing in your audio, in your sound, and that is usually the room and your mic technique and stuff like that. And a lot of people don't. They just buy the equipment and they go for it. But they let themselves down a little bit, because people won't listen to bad quality audio. And even if I've heard loads of podcasts and their content is unbelievable, and I'm almost begging them when I'm listening. I'm like, please, why don't you just record this nicely? And it's not condescending. Like, I learned this off YouTube, and when I did go to a few different studios, and I did the rest of the due diligence stuff, but I started learning this off YouTube. So anybody can spend 15 minutes and learn how to massively improve their production quality, because that is for me the biggest thing. If your quality is bad, people will not listen to you, and you won't get your message across. So nothing else really matters. It's like first impressions. First impressions, unfortunately, are important. If you give a bad first impression, you do colour someone's opinion of you, which is wrong, really. They should get to know you. But it's true. That's how we judge things. We don't have time now. We've 500 podcasts to listen to, because your friends after sending you a list of the top podcasts is for this week. Like, so if you listen to the first one and it's really echoing, you're back here and you can hear the difference there, or there's a hiss, or there's a high noise floor, or there's echoes in the background, or there's clinking, and there's people running around, whatever. People are going to turn it off, because it's really, really jarring, especially if people have you in their ears. If they have buds in their ears, it's like you're in their brain, and your audio is terrible. So they'll watch a bad YouTube video if the content is good, but they won't listen to bad audio. So for me, that's the biggest mistake for people. And it doesn't mean you have to invest money into better audio gear. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means you need to learn a little bit more about what you're trying to do here. And that's what I did. I didn't go, what's the best equipment? I said, how do I get the best sound? And when I'm happy with the sound, someone could walk in here and say, what the hell is this? What are you doing here?
Yeah.
You don't need any of these things. You know, watch that. Why have you got this turned that way? Why have you pressed that button? But I'm happy with my sound. And that's what's important for me, because people are saying to me, it's very relaxing to listen to because there's no background noise. And so that's important for me, really, really important. And I know I built the studio and all that kind of stuff as well. There's nice add-ons, but that is the biggest mistake I see people make, is to not give enough weight to the quality of the audio. And people go, oh, it doesn't need to be that good. The content's really good or whatever. It is your first impression. It's audio. People don't get to see it. They don't get to engage with it. They don't get to look at you. All they're doing is listening to you, and they're going to judge you like that if your quality isn't. And it doesn't have to be professional quality. It just needs to be a little bit of effort put into it, and that can be the making or breaking of a podcast, in my opinion. And that would be the biggest mistake I see. Just not giving that extra 15 or 20 minutes to research your craft.
Yeah, so it is worth putting in that bit. Not too much money. Again, nothing crazy. Just putting that little bit of value in for the listener.
I heard this thing. I'm going to butcher this because I heard this a while ago now, and it was a passing thing I heard. I don't even know where I heard it. It was in a video or on a podcast or something like that, and it was something along the lines of, maybe someone trying to sell me a video course or something like that. That's what it was. If you put an hour in every day for a week, I'm not asking for a big commitment. 1 hour a day for a week. That's it. You're not doing a 2-week commitment. You're not saying another half an hour for the rest of your life. An hour a day for a week. That's 7 hours. If you do 7 hours research on how to run a podcast, you would be at a level where you can run a professional grade podcast, almost, pretty much. And it's not underselling the, like, I'm really strong on this. I'm going to keep saying I'm not an audio engineer, so I'm not even in the same league as people who can do concerts or radio, anything like that. Not at all. So it's not to undermine their career. But if you want to run a podcast and you want your production value to be 200% better than it is right now, 7 hours, 1 hour a day for the next week will get you there. Just look at the resources online, go to YouTube, and don't just look at one source. Look at 10 sources and then pick the best bits of information, because one source is biased. They're trying to sell you something, trying to sell you a course. And they might not be right. Look at 10 different sources and pull the common denominators out of all that. You're going to get 5 different pieces of information that I can think of off the top of my head here that you're going to write down, and that's going to be your production, and that's going to lift your production value from echoey, I'm too far away from the to Jesus, who does your audio for you? Well, actually I do it myself. How much you spend? £100, and that was it. And now you have almost professional level audio. Like it is achievable like that. So that's what I would recommend. That, like, that's not my, again, that's just another random thing I pulled out from somebody else, but that offered me value. 1 hour a day for the next 7 days. That's 7 hours. That's a lot of time to actually spend on something when you think about it. And write down your common takeaways, and then you'll have an improvement in your production value, and it'll make such a difference. Such a difference, yeah.
And to finish up, we're going to do the Sideline 7. So
Jesus, we consult my notes here.
Yeah. So we're going to start off with, what is your favourite quote?
I have a million, as you probably recognise by now.
Let's say with top 3,
quotes.
let's say.
I'll only give you one. I'll give you one. And this is kind of a cliched one, but it's one of my favourites because it's very powerful. It kind of links in with everything I do. There's a million versions of this quote, by the way. I just wrote down kind of my version of all of them, and it's that old one. It was actually in the Rocky movie. I probably heard it first years and years ago, but it's not about how many times you get knocked down, it's about how many times you get back up and keep moving forward. And that's the big thing for me. It's not just get back up and stand there. Don't be passive. So it doesn't matter, you'll fail at everything. It took me a lot. I'm still learning that. Like you fail at things every single day. That does not matter at all. That's irrelevant. Failing is irrelevant. It's, can you just go again? So you don't need to overcomplicate that. It's the same. It's very simple. For me, on a pitch was the first place I learned that. If I get knocked down, or if I miss a shot, or if I lose a match, am I going to just hang my head and give it up? No, just do it again. Just go and do it again. If it's what you want, do it again. That's what that means to me, and it's always there in everything I do. So that's why it's one of my favourites. Rocky's one, I think it's not about how hard you get hit. It's about how you can hit and keep moving forward or something like that. It's all the same. Vince Lombardi did a version of it, but there's versions of that everywhere, but the message is the same. Get up and just do it again. Yeah, that's probably one of my favourites.
And what is the best sporting event you've been to? You can keep that to Ireland or abroad or both.
Well, I lived abroad in America for 6 months, and I was at all these crazy events and stuff like that. But by far, the number one event I've ever been at is the 2011 All-Ireland Final.
Oh, yeah, I was there as well.
Oh, yeah. The last 10 minutes of that is better than any game I've ever played, anything I've ever seen on TV. I was way up in the boonies.
Okay, yeah.
I was right in line with Stephen Cluxton when he took that free kick. But that last 10 minutes of football.
Since Kev Mack's goal, I remember I was in Lower Davin, the place shook.
There was men beside me. I was crying. There's men beside me from Kerry crying. I was crying. Everyone was hugging each other. There's no coronavirus then. And I didn't know anybody there. You know where you get the tickets for the All Ireland. I was by myself in the boonies. Everybody up there. Kerry men, Dublin men, and women were just in mad emotions. It was just crazy. And then to watch Stephen get up there, not even take a pause to think this is the All Ireland final. He just got up there, put the ball down, and kicked it over the bar. And it was like.
And his jog up was so nonchalant. And they were rushing.
We're all only having a heart attack here, boy.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah, and then like the Kieran Donaghy, like I've had a love-hate relationship with Kieran Donaghy for years. And under I love him or I hate him, and he was just in there throwing himself around, and he scored the point beforehand.
His point into
then
the
he gave
Davin.
Away the free.
Into the lower Davin where I was. Oh my God, I could have killed him. And Kieran is, I hate to admit, as a dub, is a big idol of mine. Plays football and basketball. Big idol. But what a game.
That by far it always comes back to that event. I've been at loads of stuff. That's my favourite by far.
That I think myself 2011, and I have to say the 2013 semi-final with Kerry is up there banger, as well. The pair of them, same Kev Mack with a goal in each, like amazing. I remember there yesterday, our game, or Shane Stapleton runs our game on Twitter. He had, if you could score any score in the game, what would it be? And I commented Kev Mack goal 2011, because I remember the place shook, the foundations were shaking.
It's give me goosebumps.
It was amazing. Best day ever.
Incredible.
What has been the biggest setback or challenge so far in your career? That can be sporting and professional.
Do you know what? This is a weird one, and when I looked at this one, I was like, I'm going to give a weird answer to this. I'm giving weird answers to everything today, but I'm going to give a weird answer to this. My biggest setback wasn't a specific thing. My biggest setback the whole time is me. It's my head is always the thing that holds me back from doing everything. So anytime I can think of a few things, I won't go into them now, but I can think of a few things in my life. I don't like to have regrets, but a few isolated situations that the only reason I didn't do a certain thing was because of me, and it was a massive issue for me, both in my sporting career and in my professional career, and it was me. The whole time I was always back to me. And like I said, you don't need details for this, but my big takeaway from it was, it's a lot of the time that I think there's other reasons for me not getting something or not doing something. It's very easy to blame the world and blame everybody else, but it's always been me. Anything I can think of in my life that I wish I had done, one of these kind of lying on my bed moments, at my deathbed moments, it's always been me who could have made another decision. Even though the decision might have been hard, it's always been me. So my biggest setback is me, and I think it was a big lesson for me to learn. Coming forward now, I'm a lot more likely to pull the trigger on things, because I know it's just me in my way. Like anybody can get in my way. I kind of made a footballing career, not in a very successful footballing career, but a footballing career out of this. I don't care who's in front of me. If he's 10 times the size of me, or if he's people used to give out to me all the time. Fella gave out to me the other day because there was a fella on the pitch and he was 18 and he was 30 and he came in late, and I didn't punch him, but I hit him hard the next time. So I was like, oh, he's only 18. It's like, it's irrelevant to me. Like I'm just going to move forward. I don't care who's in the way. Like, I'm going to pull the trigger in the right conditions. Obviously, I'm not going to go and hit an 18-year-old on the street, but if he's on the pitch and it's a senior football game,
once you cross the line,
it doesn't matter. But it's to bring that back to the question. It'd be easy to hold myself back for many different reasons, for many different things in sport and in life, but it's always been me has been the problem. So that has been my biggest setback. I don't like blaming other things, like just like I don't like blaming referees, even though I have a bad relationship with referees. I don't like blaming referees for anything, because it's me. It's at the end of the day, if I can't play the referee, whether he's good or bad, that's my fault. So that's kind of my biggest setback.
That's interesting. It's nice to have that.
A weird answer, yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to have the self-awareness, though, to kind of say, definitely something I need to look at, probably.
Well, I'm still looking at it, like, that sounds very wise, but it took me years to even understand that. It was a concept,
100%, what is your biggest achievement on or off the pitch, I'd say, in your instance?
On or off the pitch, I'll give you one on, I'll give you one off. The biggest one in my entire life has to be having my daughter Zoe. Again, I'm kind of tearing the eye, roll the eyes, whatever like that, but definitely, like, it's a cliche, and I talk about the cliches all the time, but unless you have a child, or you have had something, it doesn't have to be a child like that in your life happen to you, it is the most important thing. It's my biggest achievement. I didn't even do it, but it's my biggest achievement. So that is my off the pitch, my biggest achievement, definitely. And my on the pitch is a kind of a weird one. Again, I don't have a glowing sporting career or anything like that. But for me, I did my ACL 2 years ago, and it could be a career ender. And my thing always was, like, I played Division 1 years ago when I was 16. I was playing Division 1 with the senior team, and since then I haven't played Division 1 since. And then we got back to Division 1, and the 2 games leading up to that promotion, I tore my ACL, so I didn't get to play. But my biggest achievement was a personal one for me, means nothing to anybody else, was I got back to play Division 1 football. and now I'm hoping again within a year to be back in Division 1. But that was huge for me psychologically. It was like the biggest achievement I've ever had in my entire life. We've won championships and we've won leagues and stuff like that. They're all fantastic, they're great, but my big thing was I want to play Division 1, and I thought that was it done when I did my ACL when I was 30. Now, it's not old at all, and loads of people come back from their ACLs when they're 30, but it's a very hard thing to do, and I had a bad recovery, and it just meant a lot to me psychologically in a sporting context to be able to come back and compete at that level at Division 1 after having gone through that. And it was a mental battle in my head. I was all over the place in my head because I felt it slipping away. I'm never going to get. All I wanted to do was get back to that level again, whether we won it or didn't. But that was my biggest probably sporting achievement, apart from everything else.
Yeah, that's again going back to your quote. It's getting knocked down, getting back up, and keep going.
Yeah,
and getting back to that level.
Yeah, it's very powerful for yourself when you do that. And like no one else cares. No one else cares about that.
Yeah.
But for me, it was huge, absolutely huge. Yeah, it was a big one.
Looking back, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old?
You ruined this so many times in the podcast because you said this phrase over and over and over and over and over again. It's just do it. I spoke about that before. It's literally, if I could give advice to my 18-year-old self, I was really, 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 really reserved in loads of things. I didn't pull the trigger on loads of things that not loads, but a lot of things that were really big that I should have, and it was only me holding me back. So if I could go back, I'd just sit him down and say, just do it. Not that my life would be drastically different now if I had, but I would just say, just do it. If you're passionate about something and you're in the right place and you're not being manipulated by somebody else or someone else's goals or dreams or Instagram or whatever, just do it, because you don't have a lot of time. And again, they're so cliche, these things that we're talking about, but there is truth in all of this stuff. I would say just do it. You've done it with the podcast. Like I think this is amazing to do something like this. Maybe it's not blowing
took a lot to start recording and reaching out. Never mind, I haven't pressed published yet.
But look at this.
But yeah,
like we're sitting here doing 100%. It. You're just doing it. So and you'll get something from that you bring into the next thing that you want to do, whatever that is, in whatever context in your life.
Exactly.
Just do it. If it's worth it to you, just do it. If it doesn't hurt anybody else, just do it. Yeah. That would be my advice to my 18-year-old self. Wasn't that long ago though.
Yeah. I think I know the answer to this already, but
I'm going to expand on this one for you.
Dream dinner guest and why?
I don't want to say Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you, and I struggle with commitment. I can't commit to any of these kind of things. I'm going to give you a little dinner party. So
a dinner party.
Is that all right?
Yeah,
to give you a dinner party,
seems to be a bit of a theme. Yeah.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd have Morgan Freeman there because I just think his voice would relax everybody if arguments broke out at the table. I'd have The Rock.
Okay.
I love The Rock. I don't know why. I just love The Rock. I think he's very inspirational and motivational. I'd have Ross Edgley. You know Ross Edgley?
No.
I think I mentioned Ross Edgley. Ross Edgley he's a UK kind of extreme.
Oh, is this your man who swam around?
He swam around Great Britain in 157 days, in the water for 6 and out of the water for 6 hours. For 157 days he didn't touch land. But his thing is he does these feats of incredible endurance. He climbed the height of Mount Everest on an 8-meter rope. He just kept climbing this rope until I think he tore his bicep down until he had climbed the height of Everest. He ran a marathon pulling a Mini Cooper. He swam. He ran a triathlon with a tree attached to his back. But that's all impressive. But
it's the mental strength I would find. Yeah. I would admire more than
he's built himself tools to allow him to do that. I think anybody can do that stuff, and I haven't done that stuff obviously, so I'm not comparing me to Ross Edgley, but I think I have the ability or the capacity. You have the ability, capacity. Everybody has the ability, capacity to do that kind of stuff. Yeah, he has built himself a set of tools that allows him to get to a place where he can do it. I don't have those tools, so I couldn't do that tomorrow. Not a chance. I couldn't do that in 5 years. Yeah, but I could probably get there if I was able to build myself tools to get there. So I'd be really interested to download him. Now he's very, very active on social media, so you get a lot of access to him. But I'd love to have him at the table to talk about this incredible stuff.
Yeah, be a good podcast guest.
Would be a great. He was on Rogan's podcast, so
of course, I'm
hoping to get him on one day. Ross, if you're listening, because you probably listen to your podcast before I listen to mine. But yeah, he'd be there. Rogan would obviously be there. It'd just be great. Yeah. And then I'd actually like to have Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Do you ever hear Dr. Rhonda Patrick?
No.
Again, I found her through the Rogan podcast, but she is a doctor from the States. I don't know if she's a medical doctor or a doctor of physiology or something like that. But she is Rogan has her on. He says the same thing that I feel. He said when she's there, he feels like a stupid monkey. And that's what I feel like when I'm listening to her, because she's so knowledgeable about health and wellness and diet and all that kind of stuff. Like, insanely knowledgeable about all this stuff. She goes right down into the depths of it. I think she'd just be a nice one there to tell us how the mac and cheese we're eating is probably bad for us, and giving us broccoli sprouts and stuff. So that would be my little dinner party. That's good, yeah. It's a random collection
varied,
of people.
But good dinner party to have. Yeah, if you had your pick. Final question is, if your life was a book, what chapter?
I didn't even know what to answer for this one. Probably New Beginnings Part 50, because I'm always trying to
Yeah.
reinvent and
Reinvent who you are and kind
not
of
even yeah
or what you do more
kinda.
than who you are.
Yeah, every day I'm trying. Not every day. That sounds really kind of preachy. I'm
Yeah.
trying to continuously improve myself. So every day is almost a new opportunity to do something more. And again, that's, oh my God, your man has it together. I don't have it together at all.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
So if that was the name of the chapter, I think that would be apt, because I couldn't think of what else to call it. It's not the
Yeah.
beginning or the middle or the end or anything like that. It's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
just another go on the roundabout, another go to try and have another day here to try and do something. Maybe
Yeah.
another week, maybe another year, but I definitely have today anyway.
Mhm.
Well, not the whole day.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'd be what it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So look, that's all my questions anyway. The
Jeez.
plan for that
Jesus.
podcast was
sorry guys.
yeah, the plan for the podcast was going to be 30-40 minutes. We're looking at the timeline here. It's coming near an hour and a half. But Dan, I really appreciate you coming on. Really, really valuable stuff there for anyone looking to start a podcast. A lot of stuff about, your own, journey to find more about wellness and health and everything. So look, I really appreciate you coming on, and definitely be sure to check out Dan's podcast, the Primal Podcast. And if you're looking to set up your own podcast or looking for somewhere to record, be sure to check out www.primal.ie.
Very nice. You're a pro at this
Yeah,
already.
that's it. I'm a good teacher.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but
Yeah.
look, thanks very much for having me on. I'm inspired by what you're doing as well. And
I
very,
appreciate
very,
that.
very,
Thanks a
very
million.
proud to see it. It's brilliant. And I wish you the best of luck. Thanks very much for having me on.
Brilliant. Thanks a million, Dan. A massive thank you to Danny for coming on today. I really hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did and you are listening on Apple Podcasts, make sure to leave a rating and a review, as it does help the podcast to grow. Subscribe for more episodes and let me know who you would like to hear from. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Slán.